So, I wanted to come on here and talk about something that I've been thinking about ever since my last collecting workshop. I do a workshop on how to build a valuable photography collection, and it focuses on the three questions you should ask before you buy. Now, during the Q&A, someone asked me specifically about the act of when you're buying a photograph, and how you can really ensure the value of what you're buying, how you really know, what it is that you're buying is genuine. So this actually brought to mind one of the things that I talk about in my collecting guide, which I will put a link below. You could download that if you want. And it talks about one of the best questions you can ask when you are in a situation at a gallery, at an art fair, looking at something at auction. Um, what's a good question to ask? And really, I think, the one of the best questions you can ask is this typical to how the artist presented their work? And also, as an extension of that, what are the various ways of that prints of this are found out in the marketplace, right? Because the thing is that photographs are an object, and there's a negative from which any number of prints can be made. And this whole dichotomy is built into the act of collecting photographs because you have vintage prints, prints that were made around the same time as the negative was created. You have later prints. Sometimes people refer to them as modern prints. You even can have posthumous prints or estate prints. Sometimes photographs were printed to go into an exhibition. And sometimes you have a photograph that was printed to go in to be reprinted in a newspaper. And same artist could treat those prints very differently if it's going to be in on a wall in a museum versus in a newspaper, right? Um, so one of the best, and I'm going to give you two examples of where this really could have helped the people out in the process of buying because at different times in an artist's career, for a photographer especially, they may have treated the prints differently when they were younger versus when they were older and things like that. So two examples that I want to show you. Okay, so one was I was looking at some photographs from a collection, private collector who had some things that he wanted to sell. One of the pieces was a camera work photogravure. So camera work was a it was a magazine, a high-end magazine. It was started by Alfred Stieglitz, and it ran from about 1903 until just before the First World War, 1918. And it was, the first magazine that it reproduced these photogravures. It was Stieglitz, it was Coburn, it was Steichen, it was Paul Strand. It was the first time an American publication produced the writings of Gertrude Stein. It was a very, very important magazine, right? Well, and in the magazine were these hand-pulled photogravures by these different artists. And this collector had bought one, um, and it was printed. The photogravure was printed on a Japanese tissue paper, very, very delicate, right? So I'm looking at it. It's in a mat, and I open it, and usually when you see these camera work gravures, it's the very delicate Japanese tissue gravure is like tack mounted onto the page of the magazine, right? Um, and it acts as support. It's a physical support, keeps it this gravure, in a safer condition than otherwise, right? Well, so this collector had this piece and I opened it up. There was no page support under it. It was either it had come off of the original magazine page or something. It was just like by itself. It was very, it made me nervous looking at it because it's such a delicate thing, right? And I'm like, it's missing its original page. And the collector was like, "What do you mean?" And he had no idea that it was supposed to be a different way. The person who sold it to him didn't mention anything to it at the time, at least that this photographer could remember. So I'm like, if he had just been able to ask, what are the different ways that photographs, is this typical to how it's usually seen? The dealer would have been like, well, usually it's tack mounted onto the original camera work page, you know. So what does this mean for the photograph? Well, in this particular case, you know, I, it's debatable in terms of the monetary value, but I was going to say, well, I'm not, I can't ask more than if it was on the original page, it's most likely going to be worth less, right? And there are a lot of these kind of variations. So asking this question, is this typical to how the work is usually presented, is going to give you important information that you need to have before you buy it. So another example of how this question can be very, very important. I had a Winogrand photograph, Gary Winogrand, and it was from the Women Are Beautiful portfolio. Gorgeous print. It's the woman with the ice cream cone. That's the image that I had as the cover of his book. Great, great photograph, right? I showed it in my email newsletter. I have an email newsletter that I send out once a week to my people on my email list. And I got several people asking me about the piece, and someone asked me, to give them the full details and the price and all of that sort of thing. And I did, and I responded. And in my response, I had, you know, gelatin silver print, signed, all of this sort of stuff. And then it was the edition number. Well, it comes from the Women Are Beautiful portfolio, of which there were 80. Comes from an edition of 80 plus 20 artist proofs. So kind of a large number relatively, right? But that is how you find Gary Winogrand photographs. And it actually isn't even the date of the portfolio and the date of the print are only like about 4 years apart, right? So it's almost pretty much, I would say, a vintage print and a portfolio print. Well, the person who asked me about this responded, and they're like, I would never spend that much money for an edition that was such a high edition number, meaning that there were so many prints in this edition, right? And I was like, oh gosh, well, if that is your rubric for evaluating, then why are you even asking about Gary Winogrand photographs, right? Because if you are able to ask, well, how are photographs of this usually found? Well, the majority, I would say probably, I don't know, 96, 97% of Gary Winogrand photographs that you see out there in the world are portfolio prints. That is how the majority of his prints are found. So it doesn't, in that context, you have to take that into account that if you are going to buy a Gary Winogrand photograph, you accept the fact that it's most likely going to be a portfolio print. And portfolios at that time, when they were being printed in the 70s and 80s, that was like the heyday of photographers' portfolios at that time. And, coinciding with Gary Winogrand's career and his life, that's how they were produced. He has his other photographs from his, the animal portfolio, the women are better than men portfolio, big shots portfolio, women are beautiful portfolio. I'm sure there's some that I'm missing also. They all had a similar edition number, around 75, 80 prints in addition, and then a large number of what they call artist proofs, right? So that I think that it was a missed opportunity for this person because they obviously somebody had told them don't buy photographs in a large edition number. Well, you need to take each case individually so that you can understand the context and where it's coming from, because that kind of a blanket statement about large edition numbers doesn't hold up, particularly for somebody like Gary Winogrand. So those are some things that I think were really important. And if you take this question, how are prints of this usually found? Is it typical to how the artist presented their work? It will open up a conversation so that you can decide, you may find that you're looking at something and you ask that question and they're like, well, what you're looking at is a platinum print. Other ways of that this photographer found are as a gelatin silver print, right? So, or as a posthumous print, so that you're able to see where the image fits with what it is that you're looking at. You may see something and they're like, oh, this is a platinum print. That's why the price is what it is. Gelatin silver prints do exist. And depending on what your objective is in terms of rarity and price and all of that, you may decide that you would prefer a gelatin silver print or prefer an posthumous print, or that you really want to hold out for a vintage platinum print, right? So those are the kinds of considerations that you can make, but just with that one question, just the question, you can find out so much more about what it is that you're looking at and how that particular object of the photograph fits in with the photographer's habits and where he was or her at the time of their career. So, um, make sure that you download my collecting guide. And if you want to sign up for my next workshop, which is in May, beginning of May, um, send me an email. Tell me you want to get on the wait list and I'll put you on it. So, any other questions? Feel free to send me a message.